Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting. Under agenda item 1, Councillor Garner was nominated to be chair for this meeting. Can I ask that all members are in agreement with that? Thank you. Councillor Garner is now formally elected to be the chair of this meeting. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Thanks, Debbie. And welcome to this remote hearing and licensing subcommittee. As Debbie said, my name's Councillor Ben Garner, and I'll be chairing today's hearing. Before I proceed further, could I remind everyone that today's meeting is being streamed live on the Leeds City Council YouTube channel. So just so you're all aware. Could I ask my fellow two councillors as members of the subcommittee to introduce themselves? Councillor Buckley.
Yes, Councillor Neil Buckley. I represent Old Woodley Ward.
And Councillor Marshall Catong. Good
morning, Councillor Abigail Marshall Catong, representing Little London Woodhouse and the City Centre.
Thank you. And I'd like to start the hearing today by confirming that this meeting of the licensing subcommittee does meet the requirements of the council's constitution, even though members of the panel are in remote attendance, given current circumstances. While today the items will be discussed fully as would usually, remote attendance requires a few slight changes to how I'll manage the debate. So just really important that all attendees mute the microphone unless I invite them to speak, and it just avoids any background noise. And can everyone keep the cameras on during the hearing where possible, please, just so everyone else on the hearing and indeed those viewing on YouTube can see who's speaking and who's taking part. And in a couple of moments, I'll invite people to introduce themselves to make it clear to everyone on the meeting and public observers who will be involved. So thank you for your patience while we just go through that process, which is a little more long-winded than it ordinarily would be in the Civic Hall. Could I invite officers to introduce themselves, please, and then mute your microphone once you've done so, starting with Philippa.
Yes, good morning. My name's Philippa Murray. I'm a solicitor and with Leeds City Council Legal Services and advising the subcommittee this morning.
Brilliant, thank you. We've got Matthew.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Matthew, part of Entertainment Licensing, and today I'm supported by Samantha Longfellow Pennicott.
Thank you. And thank you, Samantha. Debbie.
Thank you. I'm Debbie Oldham from Governance Services, and I'm clerk to the subcommittee today.
Brilliant, thank you. And moving to the other agenda items, could I ask Debbie just to go through agenda items 2 to 5, please?
I can, thank you. Under agenda item 2, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Agenda item 3, there are no exempt items. Agenda item 4, there are no late items. And agenda item 5, could I ask members to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests? I'll take silence as there are none. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Debbie. Sorry, just trying to find the mute button there. Onto agenda item number 6, the main item for today, the application for the grant of a premises licence for Leeds Cricket and Football and Athletic Company Limited, the Rugby Bowl Emerald Headingley Stadium. Could I ask the applicant and anyone acting on behalf of the applicant to introduce yourselves, please? I think we've got Sue Ward and John Hill.
Good morning, I'm Sue Ward and I'm the Ops Director at Leeds Cricket, Football and Athletic Company Limited. I'll pass to my colleague Sian.
I'm Sian Jones, I'm Head of Customer Experience for Leeds Cricket, Football and Athletic Association Limited.
I'm John Hill, the Designated Premises Supervisor for Emerald Headingley Stadium.
Okay, thank you. That makes it a bit easier. You're all in one place and socially distanced, which is nice to see. There have been objections received from local ward councillors and members of the public, a few of whom are on the call today. So could I ask those in attendance to introduce themselves? I'll call out names, and if you can introduce yourself, starting with Councillor John Illingworth.
Yes, I'm John Illingworth. I'm a councillor for Kirkstall Ward, and I'm here to represent all 6 councillors, 3 from Hyde Park and Woodhouse and 3 from Kirkstall Ward.
Thanks, John. I'm glad we've not got all 60 here just to make things a bit confusing. So thank you. We've got Derek Cockram. Have we got Derek on the call?
Derek, you're muted.
Yes, Derek Cockram. I'm chairman of the Turnways and Laurel Bank Residents Association, as well as a neighbour of the stadium.
Thank you, Derek. Nice to meet you. Daniel Sharman.
Yep, I'm Daniel Sharman. I'm resident of the Turnways, and I'm here to object against the application today.
Daniel. Sam Frippleton.
Hello, yeah, I'm Sam Frippleton. I'm also a resident of the Turnways.
Nice to meet you, Sam. Richard Parr.
Hi everyone, I'm Richard Parr. I'm also a resident.
Thank you. Lee Davidson.
Yes, I'm resident at 15 the Turnways, treasurer of the Turnways and Laurel Bank Residents Association.
Thank you, Lee. And we've got Emma Daniel King.
Hi, yeah, Emma King, resident of the Turnways, and our house overlooks the rugby pitch.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Is there anyone I've missed in terms of objectors? Just having a check of people on screen. It's harder, even though you're all staying in the same place, than it would be in person to see you all on screen. So thank you, everyone. Could, first of all, the legal advisor, Philippa, outline the procedure for the hearing, just so everyone's very aware of that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It is an application for the grant of a premises licence for the Rugby Bowl, Emerald Stadium, St Michael's Lane, Headingley. The procedure for such applications is that the applicant addresses the committee first. Those who have made representations then address the committee. The applicant does have the chance to respond to anything said in verbal presentation. Today, there are no representations from responsible authorities. There are representations from one ward member who's here on behalf of, I think, all 6 councillors who've made objections. And then there are the members of the public who are present. And I take it that all of those present want to address the subcommittee. Can I perhaps just check that that's the case, that everybody wants to be able to address the subcommittee?
Yes.
Okay. And I think perhaps if we go through objectives with the councillor first, and then perhaps in the order that the chair's gone through as you've introduced yourselves, if that's acceptable to people. In making its determination, the subcommittee will consider what is appropriate and proportionate to promote the licensing objectives. Those objectives are the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. The licensing regulations deal with time limits. They permit the subcommittee to set a time limit on presentations, providing the same time limit is applied to each party. The usual time limit for this committee is 15 minutes per party. The applicant may choose to split their time and reserve some of that 15 minutes to respond to what has been said by objectors and perhaps in the light of questions asked. Could I ask the chair, does the subcommittee wish to impose a time limit on presentations, and if so, what length of time?
Well, usually we would do 15 to 20 minutes. Could I ask the applicant what time they'd plan for, first of all, because sometimes that's useful to then sort of build upon with the objectives. So Sue, etc., are you able to say what time you'd plan for?
Yeah, between 10 and 15 minutes, just to provide you with an opening statement. And then if you want us to answer or comment on anything afterwards, we'd be happy to do that.
Okay. Just looking at my fellow councillors' way, how would sort of 20, based on that, sort of 20 to 25 minutes total, but splits for the applicant in that 10 to 15 plus a 10-minute sort of up to 10 minutes of answering to the various objectors. No, it's a tiny bit longer, especially for that summing up, than we'd usually do with 1 or 2 objectors. But I do appreciate we've got quite a few, so it's, you know, who all have their thing to say. So I think you don't want your concerns either addressed or answered or spoken to at the very least. How does that sound, Neil and Abigail?
That sounds reasonable to me.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
So sorry, the time limit that we're going to impose is how long altogether?
For what did I say? So 25 minutes applicant. So does that mean 25 minutes for the objectors?
It does, yes, yes.
And how many have we got? 1, 2, 3. So it equates to around, if we said 4 minutes for each objector, that's actually 28 minutes. And I take it from what Sue said, actually the applicant wouldn't take the whole 28 minutes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Chair, but the time limit applies to each party.
Each party. Sorry, that's me. That's me with a planning hat on. Sorry, I'm forgetting where I am. Should we 10 to 15 plus? Should we say up to 15 minutes then? If each objector is happy with that, you have up to 15 minutes each. That gives Sue, etc. time for that. 10 minutes plus a bit of summing up, and doesn't keep us here all day as well. Looking at the number of objectors, do apologise. I had my planning hat on then.
Yeah. So in that case, a time limit of 15 minutes.
15 minutes, or up to 15 minutes, I suppose, is the important thing there. But you can use it all. And is anyone objecting to that in terms of objectors or applicants? And Neil, Abigail, are you fine with that yourselves? Cool.
Yes, Chair, that seems reasonable, in the reasonable expectation that people will be concise.
Could I perhaps check with the applicant? Would you want to split your time between a first presentation and then a summing up after other presentations have been made?
Yes, yeah, we would like to sum up at the end, please, if we could. So we'll split our time between, we'll start with 10 and summarise and have a summary at the end of 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. And following the presentation, the subcommittee members may wish to ask questions of parties. The time for questions to be asked and to be answered is in addition to the time limit we've just set for presentations. Please note that cross-examination is not permitted in subcommittee. If any party does feel that there's a crucial question that needs to be asked and answered, please direct that request to the chair, who will then determine whether or not the question should be put. Parties may request permission to call witnesses. Can I ask, does any party have any witness to call this morning? No, not by the looks of it. All documents that have been previously submitted have been circulated to the subcommittee in advance. Can I check that everybody is working from a pack which is 102 pages long? Is that right? It would be helpful if those addressing the subcommittee could, when referring to documents, identify which document, perhaps by the page number, which is throughout the pack. Additional documents can now only be tabled with the consent of all of the parties. Can I check, does anyone have any additional documents that they may want the subcommittee to consider? Any additional bits of paper that you want the subcommittee to consider? Thank you. And please note that your presentation is your only opportunity to address the subcommittee. There's no further right to sum up your case, and you do need to make sure that you have said everything you wish to say and to have taken into account during your presentation. After all the parties have made their presentations and questions have been considered, members will consider whether they have all the information they require to make a decision. Once this point is reached, members of the committee will go into a private session. If members do have additional questions to ask, they'll return to the meeting to ask those questions of parties. They'll then return to private session to make the decision. Can all parties remain in the meeting until they are asked to leave? All parties will be informed once the hearing has ended, and they will be told of the decision within 5 working days of today. Can I check, are there any representations about the procedure the subcommittee proposes to follow before we start the rest of the hearing? No. In that case, that's the procedure. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Philippa. Thank you for that. Could I ask the Licensing Officer, Matthew, to outline the application, please?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Chair. Today, members of the Licensing Subcommittee are asked to consider an application for the grant of a premises licence. This is made in respect of Emerald Edinburgh Stadium, St Michael's Lane, Edinburgh, Leeds, LS6. The application is made to host a maximum of 2 boxing or wrestling events per year on either a Friday or a Saturday, attracting a maximum capacity of up to 25,000 spectators. So touching briefly on the history of these premises, it should be noted that there are other premises licences in force which cover specific areas of the stadium and also for certain events such as live music. As detailed in the report at 6.4, the particulars for these premises licences can be seen in the list of premises in the surrounding area. As mentioned in the application, it is made specifically to host up to 2 boxing or wrestling events per year. The application proposes the sale by retail of alcohol, the provision of boxing or wrestling entertainment, and the performance of recorded music on the Friday and Saturday only between 12 noon and 12 midnight. A copy of the application can be found in the agenda pack at Appendix A on page 11, which includes the measures the applicant has offered to promote the licensing objectives at Section M. In addition to those measures, the applicant has also completed a copy of the outdoor pro forma risk assessment, which is included in the agenda pack at Appendix B on page 31 of the report. But the application has attracted representations from West Yorkshire Police, local ward councillors and a number of local residents. The representation which was submitted by the police suggested additional measures to promote the crime prevention objective, and a copy of that representation, the subsequent agreement, can be found on page 49 at Appendix D. The representation submitted by local ward councillors is a joint objection signed by each of the 6 Kirkstall and Edley and Hyde Park ward members. This can be found at Appendix E on page 55. And finally, the remaining 22 representations are individual objections from local residents. These are included in the pack for members' consideration at Appendix F, and starting on page 57 of the report on that, Chair, is an outline of the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. So we'll get to the time now where I ask the applicants to present the application. So Sue and colleagues, and if you wanted to split your time, so we're going for 10 and 5.
Yes, please.
Yep. So you'll have 10 minutes to present your application, please.
Thank you. And thank you for the outline as well, Matthew. I won't repeat that, so I'm not using any of my valuable time. I want to leap straight into the steps that we've actually taken to promote the licensing objectives. And as you all know, Emerald Headingley Stadium is a sports ground requiring a general safety certificate under the Safety of Sports Ground Act 1975. All outdoor events will adopt the same facility standards and conditions as required at all rugby fixtures to promote the prevention of crime and disorder, to promote public safety and to prevent public nuisance and to protect children from harm. We feel that we have clearly set out in our application steps we intend to take to promote the 4 licensing objectives. In addition to this, a pro forma of a risk assessment for outdoor events has been completed, and the appropriate codes from that risk assessment utilised within our application. These will, of course, form a huge part and be integral to all our operating schedules. Proof of how we promote and meet all four licensing objectives can be evidenced in our recent exchange of correspondence with West Yorkshire Police, where we agreed additional measures and conditions to be included in our operating schedule should this application be granted. We feel that we have learned and acted upon the feedback provided by previous licensing subcommittees. And with regards to communication and keeping residents and ward councillors updated, we continue to liaise and engage with all residents and ward councillors via our monthly newsletter, advising of fixtures, events and our plans. We wrote to the residents in February to advise them of our intentions regarding this application, offering a virtual meeting should they have any questions or concerns. We met with the residents on the 5th of March. I personally wrote to all ward councillors representing Kirkstall and Henley and Hyde Park, but none responded to my offer to meet and discuss any concerns or queries that they may have regarding this application. Matthew referred to the representations that this application has attracted, and there is a consistent theme that is contained within the submissions. There are concerns relating mostly to public nuisance. We believe we have provided evidence and information to the Entertainment Licence Department to contain those concerns that have been raised. However, just to confirm and summarise, the following measures will be taken and form the basis of our operating schedules. An event plan, an event management plan will be created and submitted to the Safety Advisory Group at Leeds City Council and all other responsible authorities at least 90 days before any event actually occurs. The event plan will contain the following information. It will include a noise management strategy. This will refer to waste collections and deliveries and other activities that might generate noise. Mitigation measures are set out in reports produced by APEC Acoustics. Will continue to limit the sound levels from the public address and voice alarm system and be configured to meet all requirements. Bottles will not be placed in external receptacles between the hours of 11 and 6 a.m. If required, an independent noise consultant to assess the position of all sound sources pre-event and to monitor noise throughout the event will be present. We will advertise and operate a tender complaint telephone number. And the strategy will also identify how noise arising from the holding of the event will be effectively controlled so to prevent public nuisance and show full compliance with any licence conditions. Once agreed, the contents of the strategy will be followed throughout the event. The event management plan will also include litter and waste management strategies, the location and number of litter containers, the emptying and replacement schedules, and steps to remove litter throughout the event, steps to remove litter from along the roads and entrances and exits adjacent to the site. The event management plan will also include a light pollution strategy and, of course, a travel and transport strategy. This will identify highway routes, this will identify plans and measures and arrangements that we've taken for traffic management at the site and include details of road closures and local traffic management arrangements. The event plan will also include major incident and emergency strategies. And of course, an event safety coordinator, which is usually our ground safety officer, will be appointed and be integral to all planning for the event and be responsible for all safety matters. Risk assessments will be undertaken, emergency lighting will have definitive testing schedules, exit gates and routes for pedestrians and emergency vehicles will be identified. The event management plan will also include crowd and capacity management. Our policies and procedures for rugby matches will be adapted and be very specific and amended to include boxing and wrestling events. The event management plan will contain detailed information of our CCTV system, which is in use 24/7. It will detail the location of cameras, monitoring and recording, and all arrangements. It will include the security and stewarding deployments, including details of the security command structures. And in consultation with the Safety Advisory Group and West Yorkshire Police, and take into account all the arrangements for the attendance of as many police officers as is considered necessary. The event management plan will also include a medical plan, as does all our events here at the stadium, but specific measures will be taken to ensure that we have qualified medical practitioners for the contestants as mandated by the British Boxing Board. I think it's really important that we concentrate on key facts, and representations sometimes don't always include the actual facts and valid information. This application is to host 2 events per year, as Matthew has referred to, with a maximum of 25,000 spectators. That is before we have actually excluded any areas where we may position a boxing ring or walkways. So this is the maximum figure that we have actually applied for. I think it's important to note that pre-COVID, the number of sporting events that were proposed for 2020 was just 61. In 2019, we hosted 71 events, and in 2018, just 68 events. Even with the addition of 2 boxing or wrestling events, this still is extremely low usage of such an iconic venue as Emerald Headingley Stadium. And just to point out, these figures include rugby union events that attract less than 500 people, and also include domestic cricket matches that fall over 4 days that attract less than 2,000 spectators. Obviously, for the last 14 months, all events at Emerald Headingley have been hosted and played behind closed doors. I think it's really important to note that we have no outstanding complaints registered with the Environmental Health Service and have none on record since 2018. We have staged other ad hoc events in the past, and the Safety Advisory Group at Leeds City Council have not reported any adverse feedback following these events. And just to close, we feel we have considered all the points raised within the representation that this application has attracted and mitigate the same with various proposed actions. Should this application be granted, we will work very closely with a boxing promoter to agree an event date and produce an event management plan. And that will be made available to the responsible authorities, including the local authority, no later than 90 days before the event. The stadium management team operate under the requirements contained with the General Stadium Safety Certificate, including the COVID-19 addendum issued by Leeds City Council on the 15th of July 2020. The safety and well-being of all those that visit Emerald Headingley is of a paramount importance to us, and we totally understand the impact of COVID-19, and our priority will always be that of public health and safety. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to questions from members of the subcommittee. So, Councillor Marshall Catton and Councillor Buckley, do you have any questions for the applicant? First of all, I do have a few myself, but I'll defer to my fellow members first.
Thank you very much, Chair. What I would like to, thank you, Sue, for your presentation. What I would like to ask, obviously, reading your application and hearing your defense to it, is the finishing times, which is really, really quite late. So can you, compared to all the other hours that we have granted you license for, why are you applying for this particular license with a very, very late finish?
Yes, we applied for a midnight finish as opposed to an 11 p.m. finish, just to give us that additional sort of wind up for a boxing event. We have since applying for the application, we have undertaken some work with a boxing promoter to understand the typical agenda. And it has apparent that usually boxing events do finish around 11 p.m. So we would be open to reduce the finish time and bring that back in line with other events to 11 p.m. as provided we could have a wind up of around 30 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, Neil, any questions?
Yes, yeah, thank you, Chair. And just to say that I know residents initially were describing exactly where roads like the turnways are and that kind of thing. And I am actually quite extremely familiar with this area, because I go to what is now known as a stadium, admittedly from the cricket side rather than the rugby side, but I'm completely acquainted with how close these streets are to this proposed event. And just following on from my colleague's question there, given that, as I understand it, the wrestling and/or boxing would not start until late in the evening, and the license is, the application is from 12 noon, what happens in the meantime? What happens as an event between 12 noon and whenever it is, 8 o'clock? And just talking at the same time about, for instance, Sue mentioned in her presentation that CCTV would be activated, if I understood it right. I'd like her to tell me something a little bit more about that, because on the grounds of, given that there are so many hundreds of houses very close together and very close to the ground, what guarantees could she give that the CCTV wouldn't be picking up what it shouldn't be picking up in terms of people's private activity? If she could address those initially, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Yeah, just to follow on regarding the typical agenda of a boxing event, the recent discussions with the boxing promoter, it has highlighted that we would normally start an event around 12 noon, but that would very much be background checks and safety checks, including public address and voice alarm systems. The actual event, we would open the doors, we feel around 5 p.m. and undercard boxing would commence around 5:30 with a finish of the new proposed time of, say, 11. So the window for the actual boxing event would be around 5 p.m. from doors opening until around 11 p.m. Does that answer that question for you? Yeah. And then moving on to CCTV, throughout 2018-19 and last year, we deployed a very sophisticated CCTV system, which has been approved by the Safety Advisory Group, the Stadium Safety Advisory Group, including West Yorkshire Police. And the system actually, if you pan out over into the turnways, the houses are actually blocked out. So if we did pan out and it went into Mr. Parr's bedroom window, you wouldn't be able to see anything because it actually blocks those areas out. There's certain codes of practice that we have to follow, and forgive me because I've forgotten the name of them, but they are completely greyed out, so you don't pick up any personal information or see anything that you're not supposed to see in the residential households in the neighbourhood.
Yeah, thank you. Is that all right, Neil? Anything to follow up on?
Well, I was just going to request, Chair, whether I could come back just quickly with two or three other points. We'll no doubt get obviously some more chances to ask things in depth later on. But just looking at the licensing objective, I always keep, when I first became a member of licensing 9 years ago, I actually jotted these down on a piece of paper, just as an aide-memoire for me. And I've never, I always have this bit of paper when I go into a licensing meeting. And in terms of the four things: public nuisance, crime and disorder, public safety, and the protection of children and the vulnerable, It seems to me that it could be argued that all of those conditions are potentially breached by this event. And whilst that's a broad question, I would like to be convinced that there are enough measures in place, because looking at all the letters, it seems to me that all of those would be breached by the noise and the level of pollution and the traffic and the fact that there are no trains and buses at that time of night. I'll leave it there, Chair. We'll no doubt get a little bit more detail later on.
Thank you. Was that more of a comment, Neil, than a question?
Well, if Sue wants to address it in
I was going to say, yeah.
Whatever way she wants, that's fine by me.
So do you want to address any of that now? Or?
Yeah, I do feel that the opening statement that I've just communicated does contain all the public nuisance and does contain any of the issues that's been communicated in the representations. I also feel that the pro forma that's been completed and the application also does cover the containment surrounding the 4 licensing objectives. So working on a particular event like this, there would be various safety advisory groups that are specific to an event, such as the boxing event. And we would all work through any containments and ensure that all 4 licensing objectives are met, including anything else that's included in our general safety certificate. That event plan would have to be signed off by the local authority. That's the Leeds City Council Safety Advisory Group, which includes all agencies, West Yorkshire Police, Yorkshire Ambulance, Environmental Health. So we do feel that we have covered all 4 licensing objectives, and all that is contained in the application and in the V2 pro forma and in my opening statement.
Okay, thank you. So a couple of things from me. There's going back to last year and the last sort of big license, and so you've mentioned that you've learned from previous licensing subcommittees, and at that time you were given a sort of license time up until 11 or 11:30, with a capacity of that 5,000 or so people fewer than this license you're putting forward today, or this application you're putting forward today, and especially considering that the sort of big events that late, based on the licensing subcommittee and the license you gained last year, haven't had a chance to be proven, or I don't believe so, due to COVID, and no big events of that nature have been on. How have you come to the conclusion that actually you could safely accommodate 5,000 people more later at night without having proven that actually we can, the area and yourselves can handle what was granted last year?
So we host rugby events, and we host rugby events with a licence that takes us all the way to 11:30 on an evening. Those rugby events have a capacity of 19,500. You're right, we haven't had a live concert event, but this application is for boxing. This application is to serve alcohol, which we do at every rugby event, and it's to use recorded music that we do at every rugby event. And I'm sure you'll agree that we've been running those very successfully now for many years. In actual fact, it's not that long ago, 20 years or so ago, that we would have hosted rugby events with around 40,000 people here. It's only in the most recent years that that's been brought in line to 19,500. The biggest event I've actually hosted is just over 20,000. But the makeup of the stadium, with the stands and the pitch, and I'm sure you'll agree with, for a boxing event, you would also use the pitch and the surrounding area. So in actual fact, the capacity of the stadium with the pitch is around 30,000. And we have calculated that we can actually, from an access and egress point of view, host 30,000 people safely. However, we didn't feel that 30,000 was a number that we needed to attain. We reduced that down to 25,000. But as mentioned, that is a maximum amount of people. There will be a ring that will be reduced from those figures. There'll be walkways as well from the pitch that will take those that are competing into the changing areas. So that maximum figure, we do feel that we can cope with that. We have run events professionally and very successfully for many, many years, and I don't see this being any different.
Okay, thank you. And again, going back to last year's, although they are different applications, and we do have to consider them quite separately. There was a condition there about any de-rigging being in the next day, and I don't see a similar condition on the list that you've given in the application. Would you be willing to repeat that condition for the live events for the boxing? So any de-rigging isn't done, at 11 p.m. onwards, and obviously done the next day, and especially if it's a Sunday, a bit later in the morning.
The application is just for Fridays and Saturdays, and that is one of the reasons that we just applied for Fridays and Saturdays, so that the following day would be a non-working day for most. But of course, we would not want to rig on the evening of the event. So yes, we would definitely accept that condition should the licence be granted.
Okay, thank you. They were my questions. Are there any other questions from Abigail or Neil?
Not at the moment. I'm sure we'll have some later.
Thank you, and thank you, Sue. So moving to the objectors, would you like to address the subcommittee? I'll go in the same order as I did with the introductions earlier. So starting with Councillor Illingworth, please. John, you have up to, I'll stress up to, I'm sure you might want to use 15 minutes, please.
Yes, I hope I've understood the procedure, Chair. I'm now speaking to my objection. Is that correct? Not asking questions of the applicants.
Yeah, so it's just you making your representation, and then we as members have the opportunity to ask any questions of you.
Okay. Yeah, so I'd like to read out our written objection so that to act a bit of an aid memoir to the points that are being made. It won't take very long. And I don't think we need anything like the time that's allocated for us to speak. But it's an objection to the application. It comes from all 6 councillors. That's the 3 Headingley councillors and the 3 Kirkstall councillors. And we're writing as a group on behalf of residents who've approached us to express their concerns. I was just checking the dates. I noticed the emails from Sean and Sue Ward, the start of March, end of February. And immediately my email correspondence is full of residents' objections and discussions as to how the adverse effects of the application likely to have on the local area. We have one resident in particular who approached us to ask if we would object on their behalf without disclosing their name. So we've done that. We're requesting that our own objection should be publicised and made available to members of the Licence Committee. Obviously, that's the case. Leeds Rugby have applied for a premises licence to host boxing and wrestling matches within the Rugby Bowl. It includes a pitch and all 4 stands which sit within the rugby stadium. They state they hope to host a maximum of 2 events per year between the hours of 12 noon and midnight, and either a Friday or a Saturday, attracting approximately 25,000 spectators on each occasion. Our objection to this proposal is on the basis of the prevention of public nuisance caused by noise, lights, and the traffic, all moving after 12:30 p.m. in a built-up residential area that's already heavily affected by noise pollution. I noticed that the point that Sue's making, that there haven't been many complaints recently. I think that's because people have given up. The stadium is extremely noisy. It's intrusive in Kirks, it's intrusive in Headingley, and I think the attitude of the public is we're stuck with it. But it doesn't make it a good thing. And I think I never heard anybody in the 40 years I've served as a councillor never heard anybody suggest that the stadium was anything other than noisy, and suggest that they wish they'd never granted the application of amplified music or crowd noises and so forth. It's a nuisance. The stadium are aware that the councils receive frequent complaints about parking in residential areas when rugby matches are on, and the disturbance this causes to local residents. I noticed on the objection file, objection 7, person, don't know, man or woman, describing the disruption caused by parking up their street, the fact they can't get in and out of their own house, and the practical difficulties which match day causes. We are gravely concerned that the application outlines that people will be leaving the stadium up to 12:30 a.m, which is much later than current finishing times, about 10 p.m. We object to this in the strongest terms. Most people attending the stadium park in residential areas in the Headingley, Burley and Queenswood areas. We anticipate significant disturbance to local residents caused by up to 25,000 people leaving the stadium at 12:30 to 1 a.m. We're also concerned about the serving of alcohol till 12 a.m. Currently, large sports events in the stadium finish at 10 p.m. Extending the serving of alcohol until 12 p.m. with an additional request for an extra half hour in order for people to start vacating the premises would mean a realistic actual finishing time closer to 1 a.m. We're concerned that this will result in extreme noise disturbance for our residents. If this licence is approved, which we are strongly requesting is not the case, we would insist that alcohol is only served until 10 p.m. in line with current practice. We're also concerned about floodlights. The proposal includes full floodlights until 11 p.m. with dimmed lights after this. Presumably until everyone has left at 12:30 p.m. We believe this will cause disturbance to residents living near the stadium. I might point out in aside at this point that I used to work obviously within the university teaching students, and there's a general view that students are quite a noisy lot, but I used to get a lot of student complaints about noise, difficulty of working, difficulty in concentrating with the amplified music from the stadium. So it wasn't just the old fogies, as it were, who were grumbling about this, but students working in the university also found noise a big nuisance and objected to it. Car parks will be lit and people will start leaving the area at 12:30 to 1 a.m. as outlined above. The Elida Gibbs field in Kirkstall Ward has been used for overflow parking for other events at the stadium, but these have all finished at 10 p.m, which is reasonable, with the cars gone by then. It's of grave concern to Kirkstall Ward councillors in particular that the car parks will be lit until 12:30 a.m. These are fields surrounded by ordinary residential housing, ordinary people trying to get a decent night's sleep, and they will be very much affected by the noise of cars leaving the car park and the lights and so forth at 12:30 a.m. Music. The amplified music is a problem at the moment, and again, it's proposed to go on until 12 a.m. in an outside area. It's not reasonable. It will cause considerable noise disturbance to Headingley residents, Kirkstall residents also. Councillors already receive frequent complaints with the current events and their earlier finishing times. And finally, it's amazing we have to make this point, but it's true. Litter and street urination. Residents frequently complain of the considerable litter left behind after matches, which is not adequately cleared by the stadium. We are concerned that longer events will generate additional litter. We also believe the disgraceful behaviour of public urination in residential streets will be worse due to the later finish times, later sales of alcohol. And I've met residents who have been pointing out kids' toys in the garden and saying they'd been urinated on during the night and their kids were going to play on them the following day. They obviously wash them, but it's disgusting. It happens. It isn't a rare event, and the public should not be subjected to it. So we do, all 6 of us, strongly object to this application for the reasons outlined above and request that the Licensing Committee refuse it. We also request that one of us is able to speak. Well, obviously that's the case, that's been granted. I am here to speak to it on behalf of my colleagues. We are of a united viewpoint. Amplifying the statement just slightly, I'd like to make the point that public transport will have ceased by midnight. Essentially, all the visitors, the audience, will be coming by car, but unless they can walk very locally. Then little option of no trains, no buses, no means of getting back home from this event. So it's likely to be an entirely car-driven event, and it will test the road network to an unbelievable extent. It is a real problem. We don't know how it will work. We think there'll be a serious disruption and congestion as people try to get out of the higgledy-piggledy parking that we see before major events. So people have squeezed their car into every last space in the area, and people trying to extricate themselves afterwards, revving engines, flashing lights. It'll be very disruptive to people who live in the immediate area. I think I'd like to pause there and prepare to answer questions. But certainly, it's unanimous view among the local councillors that this is a bridge too far, and we should not be doing this sort of thing in what is a residential area.
Thanks, John. Members, any questions for John? And I suppose if we had any questions in for individual objectors at the end of all the objectors as well, we could ask those in a few minutes' time as well. But any questions at the moment?
Not at the moment, Chair, perhaps later on.
That's fine.
Same.
Thanks, John. Thank you. On to the next objector, just going down the list here. Derek Cochran, Mr. Cochran. Up to 15 minutes, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think the main thing that we have same as the councillors is people contacting me. But what is worrying is when we talk about consultation and how we interact with the stadium. We found out by a notice being posted on the lamppost. I was contacted by 3 residents saying, "What's this about?" I then contacted the stadium and was told, yes, this was the event. And then after that, we were notified by the monthly letter, but we had no previous conversation regarding this, which, belies the claim that they consult with neighbours. We find it, they only tell us what's going to happen. They do not do any consulting. We went to a meeting with them, we took various points with them, but I think we came away from the meeting without any satisfaction whatsoever, and with no idea that this ridiculous 12 till 12 drinking was a problem. I notice now they're coming back from the 12 o'clock to 11 o'clock. I think we could have focused that as being a concession that they would make to make it look like it was a reasonable action on their part. But the actual ridiculous application to be to 12 o'clock was what put residents back really up in the first place. And it may be worth pointing out, because you referred to the previous application for 2 music concerts. And one of the main items of that was that we were going to have a demonstration of what the noise effects would be, which we haven't. What we did have, we had a concert that was only very poorly attended, and even then the music did get really loud towards the end of the evening. So we have no example of what it would be like with 20,000 people in, with music and crowd noise. regarding boxing and wrestling, we have no idea what the noise levels are going to be. And to be honest, when we went to the meeting, it was obvious that the stadium do not know what crowd noise level will be. We can accept that they have control of the tannoy system and how that's played, but they have no control of the crowd noise. And with the music, they were going to face the stage away from the turnways, but with the wrestling and the boxing, the turnways, the West Terrace is going to be open. So all the noise is going to be flooding through. And this is going to be a real problem. And I think the people who have families, were one of the old fogies, I think we were referred to as being objectors, but the people who have families really do have a problem with this. I think what I'd like to say and all is the music application the meeting was in September, but I noticed this application is dated before that meeting about the music. So they knew about the boxing and wrestling applications before we'd actually have the meeting on the music. So what they're talking about were 2 reasonable events, music a year, that would be crowd control. But in the background, there was another event. And while they say the number of events over the year are maybe not many, what we are saying is these are going to be another 2 weekends during summer where we will be invaded by noise, traffic, and the lighting, and the drinking, and the complaints that Councillor Lingmouth made about people that are doing things they shouldn't be doing in the streets. So although I think it's just another 2 nights, weekends added to the other 2 that they got permission for, then on top of all the events during the summer, it's going to be very rare when we don't have a weekend that's disturbed by noise and pollution. Thank you. I'm going to pass it over now, if that's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Cochrane. Any pressing questions?
Hello?
From my fellow councillors, first of all. And again, we could do a bank of questions at the end of the objectives.
Can we speak to the chair?
Yes, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Did you want to ask a question, Mr. Cochrane?
Sorry, no, thank you.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Brilliant. So we're on to our third object now. Daniel Shawman, Mr. Shawman, again up to 15 minutes.
Thanks, Councillor. So just to address a few things that Sue mentioned earlier, and one thing that Derek just pointed out was that the stadium only engaged with residents after the application had been put in and after prompted by residents, not before, and they didn't engage with us to understand what our previous concerns might be for other events. So that was reactive engagement, and they didn't contact every resident. They only contacted the Turnways residents because they were prompted by Derek as the treasurer. So again, that was it's not a true representation of what happened. Sue talked about a lot of the transport strategy and the strategy for the events management. None of that is in place in this application. So we are yet to see what all these things would be. And they can't be relied on from the standard rugby matches because it is a completely different event. It's, people on the pitches drinking for potentially 12 hours, different types of noise, the noise of 25,000 people that nobody knows what the impact will be. So just a couple of things mentioned there. So just onto my objection. So firstly, the stadium has been labelled as a bowl. So I'd just like to point out that it's 3 stands and then a completely open western terrace that backs on immediately to the Turnways, which is a residential street with lots of families and small children, all living within meters of the side of the stadium. So the noise of 25,000 people up to 11, 12 o'clock at night watching an event that by nature is exciting and, it needs crowd enjoyment will just have a massive impact on the residents of the Turnways and the other surrounding streets, Grey Shields Avenue. So it's the noise from the crowd that will be the huge factor here, not the noise from the PA system, because we know that is within a limit, but the commentator during in between rounds will be getting the crowd excited. So again, 10, 11 o'clock at night while we're trying to go to sleep and have children in bed, it's just going to be a massive impact on all the residents around the area. The potential disruption for 12 hours of noise, and that is what the application is. It's 12 hours from 12 till 12 that has been put in, is a serious threat to safety and our right to live in a quiet and safe environment. As mentioned previously, 25,000 people leaving the stadium between 12, 1 a.m. will have a huge impact on the level of noise, people shouting, people that have been drinking for hours on end, people that have been excited by the boxing. This will all be huge levels of noise, litter, vomit, people that have been drinking, urinating in the street, broken bottles. And again, as it's already been mentioned, it will be a huge public nuisance and impact to the people that live in the surrounding areas of the stadium. Transport's already been mentioned, but there will likely be hundreds of taxis all required at the time that the event finishes. So as we've already said, the surrounding streets can't cope with the amount of cars. Taxis will be noisy, beeping, revving engines, adding pollution. So this is all things that are adding public nuisance and, environmental harm. And as mentioned before, trains will have finished, the buses won't be running. And this event cannot be likened to a typical Rhinos match. It's just completely different. It's different in its makeup. There's 5,000 more people and different levels of people drinking for long periods of time. Watching a boxing match is different than families going to watch a rugby game. Again, mentioned already, but parking around the ground is just not adequate for those numbers of people, people watching the game, and then people working during the game. So all the people, running the event, there's going to be hundreds of people doing that. So who are not drinking, so they will all need parking. So they will immediately take up the parking spaces available at the stadium. So it's just not able to cope with this type of event. As mentioned already, floodlights in the ground. These are already an impact on Rhinos matches. The car park behind the stadium shines into our house, and the nature of a boxing match will need lighting, and it will just be a huge impact to those living around the area. The alleyway that runs between the stadium has recently been the focus of attacks, and it's just not a safe place for people to be walking down at 12 a.m, 1 a.m. There's no CCTV in there currently. I know there was a mention of some high-tech CCTV in the ground, but again, around the stadium at that time of night, it's just a public safety risk for, if someone's late leaving, it's just adding extra risk that people don't need. I did, in the limited time that I had as a father of two running a business, I did a little petition as well, which wasn't accepted as a document for the objection, but that had over 28 signatures on it, and that's just from the couple of hours that I had to be able to do that. So it just highlights the amount of people, in addition to the ones on this call, that object to these licenses. And as mentioned before, this is the the third licence application we've had in 3 years from the stadium. As a parent and a father, I don't have time to be objecting to these licenses, and it creates a level of stress and anxiety between residents that we don't need and we don't want. And seeing these signs go up and then having to write an objection letter and then attend these hearings, this is all things that we don't have time for. This is all time that we have to submit from our own time. So the stadium just need to take a bit of ownership of the objections from local residents that these are impacting. And as mentioned by the councillor before, the stadium is a nuisance. We had a meeting last January 20, highlighting that the PA system that was added when the stadium redevelopment took place 3 years ago, I think, is still a huge impact on the turnways. And we highlighted that in a residents meeting, and that has yet to be addressed. Nothing's been changed. So when the rugby matches do start up again with full crowds, that's still going to be an impact. And it just highlights the commitment to local residents from the stadium that we don't get that engagement back that is discussed. This licence application is purely money driven, with little thought for the surrounding areas, the surrounding residents. And I'd seriously like the stadium and the councillors to understand that this level of stress that residents receive when these licence applications go in is unwanted. We don't need it, we don't want it, and the impact the events will have, again, will have a serious impact on our stress levels, our mental health. And we've already mentioned that there's 4 events per year that the stadium have license for. This is an additional 2 events on top of the 60 plus events that I think Sue mentioned were rugby matches. And as Derek mentioned, we're not going to have any weekends a year when we can sit and enjoy our home and our garden. And during the summer when we should be outside enjoying our home, we're just not going to have these. So we don't need additional events, and we don't want additional events. So I would urge the councillors to reject this application, and I would urge the stadium to stop trying to turn the rugby grounds into an events stadium and just use the rugby ground for playing rugby as it's made for. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sharman. Thank you. Any pressing questions? Again, we'll ask any of objectors in the bank at the end.
Chair, if I can.
Yeah, go ahead, Neil.
I was just going to ask, well, first of all, just to say that Mr. Cochrane and Mr. Shawman made very compelling statements there. I think they were very concise and very impressive, it seems to me. Looking at our pack, apart from the letter from the joint letter from the 6 councillors, from page 65 onwards, there are various letters from residents. And a lot of the complaints and comments in there have been outlined by these 2 gentlemen. But one of the things I'd just like to possibly ask Mr. Shawman about, whether he could pick this up, was that in one or more of the letters, it mentions the contention that on days such as this, the parking in the area would be or is such that residents feel almost marooned in their own homes. They either can't get out or get in at certain times because of the sheer volume of traffic arriving. And I wonder if he could just describe to us whether that's true.
Was that to myself or to Mr. Cochrane?
I think you, Mr. Shoreham, if you can.
The parking on the turnways is permitted. So I think that the parking issues are more on the St Anne's Drive side. We do see additional parking, and then on rugby matches there are cars parked there that shouldn't be, that we know they turn up just for the rugby games and then they disappear. We also see people doing drop-offs in the turnways to go down the Ginnell So it's a little shortcut so they don't have to drive around the stadium. So we do see additional parking. I think the other streets on the other side probably see it much worse because I don't think they're permitted. So yeah, I don't know if there's anybody on the call that could speak on behalf of the St Anne's side.
Yeah, it's Richard Parr. I think the St Anne's side, absolutely, and the Cardigan Triangle in particular, because a lot of those houses are they're Victorian houses. There's no driveways, and often it's bumper to bumper, and those are on rugby matches. I know that very well, quite close. So that's the kind of the first place you might head to when you need to park in the area, and I know that causes a lot of strife, and also late at night when everyone finishes, then there's lots of slamming of doors and things like that.
Yes, the Stanmores and the single track bridge over the railway is a major focus for Kirkstall. And obviously the Elijah Gibbs ground is part of the Stanmores area. And so a lot of match day parking there. And obviously Queenswood Drive as well, we get match day parking to the great dismay of the people who live on Queenswood Drive. So certainly in Kirkstall, we do see quite widespread effects. And it's obviously, people talk about being marooned in their houses. They've got a car in the drive and they can't get it out. And they grumble to us about that.
Okay, thank you. If we just remember the, you can put your physical hand up as well as a Zoom hand. It just helps with people speaking, that's all. But thank you. Neil, any more on that?
No, that's fine, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll go on to Sam Frippleton. Mr. Frippleton, are you happy up to 15 minutes, please?
Yeah, hello. First, I'd like to say I agree with everything that Mr. Shawman said before me and think they're very well made points. I'm primarily concerned about the noise and lights during the extended operating times included in this application. I'm concerned about the additional events being added on top of the recent application for music events. This creates a significant addition cumulatively on the noise-free time of nearby residents, which is additional to the rugby events that are the primary use of the stadium, which is a nuisance. This additional license has also been applied for before testing, and as mentioned by others previously, the music license that has previously been granted which seems very premature. Both of these applications will be a nuisance despite the mitigating standards set out by the stadium. Noise from the tannoys and speakers and crowd can be heard within houses. I know, as I live within one of these, and there are numerous young families which will inevitably be affected. This nuisance will be emphasised by the extended hours, larger capacity crowds, and noise for this particular application for boxing and wrestling matches. So to sum up, it is the constant intrusive nature of the noise, along with the proposed longer hours application, is additional to the untested recent license for numerous music events that are my primary objection. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frippleton. Any pressing questions from Neil or Abigail? Thank you. That's really useful to add to what we've heard so far. I will move on to Richard Parr. Mr. Parr, are you happy with up to 15 minutes, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for taking the time to listen to us and for giving us all the opportunity to speak. That's really very much appreciated. I'll try and keep it as short as possible. I really wanted to speak to 3 points: the noise, the crowd management, and the parking, and some thoughts in conclusion. First, wanted to agree with what Derek, Dan, and Sam said entirely. This is something like the third application in 3 years, and frankly, it is exhausting, time-consuming, and stressful. I'm having to respond to these and come to these events and spend lots of time writing emails and that kind of thing. And I'm sure that's reflected throughout the community. We're doing this on top of our jobs and COVID and everything else. And most local people won't have seen the kind of A4 signs around the perimeter. They go in the other direction, or they work from home at the moment. So many people will have no idea what's happening, what's coming, which is really concerning. And I just wonder what more could be done about raising awareness in the future, and who's got responsibility for that. I think it's important to reference that, the applicant has said that they're a family-orientated business many times during these hearings, and I think that's very laudable. But here we are 6 months later after the last application, talking about boxing matches and late night drinking, and it just seems a complete contradiction of that aim. I was pretty gobsmacked, to be honest, when I read this application. So I think it's sort of anything but, and I think that should be recognised if this is the change in strategy of the stadium. So just to talk about noise, and I think the application is quite vague on the noise limitations generally, but it is the impact that I'm most concerned about. I think one of the other representations mentioned there's something like 6 primary schools within 10 or 15 minutes walk, which shows just how many kids there are in this area, and many of them walk right past the stadium and the Ginnell every morning to pass the litter to get to their schools. I own a house backs onto the stadium. It's about 20 meters away. My kids' bedrooms face the stadium. There's no way I can avoid that. So it's something I really care deeply about. And in terms of the wider context, Sue mentioned how many events are held in total, and I just want to, in the interest of having all the facts on the table, make that clear. 71 rugby matches, plus the 4 music concert late night events approved last year, plus these 2 events. That works out, it's easily 1.5 events per week. And that's without taking into account the many cricket events which happen throughout the year as well. So I think it's really important to be clear that we are talking about a lot of events. And of course, is a completely different kettle of fish in terms of rugby matches, music venues, that kind of thing, which others have talked about already. I think it's really important, though, to note that the impact of this, when you've got kids, most of them go to sleep at 7 o'clock. Many of us go to sleep about 9 o'clock because they need to, because the kids wake up. But the evidence is really clear that sleep disruption is really bad for your health. Mental health, physical health, causes low birth weight in extreme cases. The World Health Organization has said that noise pollution disproportionately affects kids. In the news today, all the big outlets, there's a big report saying that women with sleep disruption are twice as likely to die from heart disease and stroke. This is a really significant issue, and this is an area which is already under the flight path, and we all know that's very controversial, and there'll be more night flights and that kind of thing. So I think it's really difficult to see how the stadium is going to be able to kind of satisfy the noise limits in the area based on just the realities of the event that it's proposing. I'm just not sure how they can reasonably do it without disrupting people's sleep. And that's just the nature of the area. That was a decision that was made when, the stand was rebuilt a few years ago, not to move it to a more kind of isolated area like Ellen Road maybe is. It's really, if you think about the Leeds First Direct Arena in the city centre, that was designed specifically with noise cancellation in mind in its structure. Because there was residents nearby, and they knew that from the beginning. And that's got a capacity of, I think, 13,000. The stadium are asking for nearly twice that. So this kind of blows a hole through this family-friendly image, and I think sets a bad example for future events in Leeds and beyond. I wonder what Leeds First Direct think about this. They might be a better place to host this kind of event, I think. And just really briefly on traffic and crowd management, all I'd really add to that is I think the point that Councillor Buckley already made, which is that the last train to Leeds is something like 11:45 at the moment. So under the 12 o'clock closure, if that was maintained, I know there's a proposal to bring it forward, then that's clearly an issue. And buses are far less regular in the night time as well. So just lastly, and in summary, I think this application should be rejected in its entirety, frankly, because I think it's a serious risk to the health of children and residents. And I do have concerns about the nuisance issues, even more so now that I know that maybe this event could run from 5 o'clock till 11 o'clock. That's 6 hours of drinking. that's kind of, we're getting into festival territory levels of drinking, and some people will drink that whole time. I've been to these kind of events. You know, I think, you know, sort of, God forbid, if it did go forward in some form, then I think the event should be included within that 4 event limit of the music license. So you know, if they want to sacrifice a couple of concerts, then I suppose maybe, but I don't think that excuses some of the late night concerns and things like that. And I think some consideration might be given to supporting residents with soundproofing and things. You know, if this is the direction that, you know, we're going to continue to be up against for years, I think that's really got to be thought about, because I'm not sure how else they can reasonably kind of protect residents. So thanks for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Pat. Any questions? I'm just appreciative we're near at the end of the list of objectors. I have a few questions I've been writing down along the way, but actually some of them are being answered by subsequent objectors, which is quite good actually. But anything we need to ask right now from Abigail or Neil? That's fine. We'll move on to Lee Davidson. Mr. Davidson, up to 15 minutes, please.
Yes, it's okay. I'll be a lot shorter than 15 minutes. I think many of the points that I wanted to make have already been made. The one I principally would like to pick up is one that the chair, you chair, have already made, which is that we haven't actually seen in practice the full effect of how the music events would actually be run. I went through quite a lot of work when the music licensing application was being made. We haven't seen that tested, and I think it's absolutely premature for this kind of application for a different and larger kind of event to be brought forward at a time when we don't know in practice what the outturn of such events would be. So that I think is an important consideration. I'd like to pick up, I noticed Richard Parr a few minutes ago suggested that perhaps they might be able to try out one of these events, but within a total such as the total number of music events already given permission for. I don't see why why I think the panel would be ill-advised to allow extra events when we don't know quite how this sort of event will turn out, and it hasn't been possible to test that out in the last year. I did find something strange. I've mentioned it in my objection. Subsection E of section M on the form appeared to think that the children who are to be protected are children within the stadium. But of course, that's not the case, and I couldn't see a great deal in the form relating to the consideration of children outside the stadium. But that point has been made by people younger than myself, residents in the Turnways, who do have children. Public nuisance, I noticed that the dimming of lighting was picked up in the dimming of the lighting was picked up in the application form, but there was absolutely no mention of a diminution in the noise level. And that struck me that does that mean that we could have until midnight full volume music of the sort that is being envisaged for this occasion? We know nothing about the pattern of use of music within the event. None of these details are made clear, and therefore it's an entirely unknown quantity what the level of nuisance would actually be. In general, I object to the advance on times. I think it's salami technique that the stadium has been using for years. They are granted permissions up to a certain time for so many hours, and then the next time they come back with an application which is for more hours, each time trying to nudge and get and allow drinking in particular, with all the noise generation and traffic generation which that will give rise to. So in conclusion, I think that this application should not be granted until we've had an opportunity to see how the stadium can run music events and run them in a way which is tolerable in the immediate neighbourhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. We'll go on to the last objector, and then any mopping up for questions from myself or my fellow councillors after that, if that's okay. So we're on to Emma King. Mrs. King.
Hi, thank you. Yes, thank you, Chair. I also won't take up 15 minutes, don't worry. I mean, certainly my neighbours and the other objectors and Councillor Illingworth, I think, have covered everything that I put in my objection, which was also on behalf of my husband as well. I just want to reiterate a couple of things. The litter and the mess, I mean, I'm sure, this stadium obviously does tidy up to a point after a match or after a big event, but it's still in the alleyway. There's always quite a lot of litter, and so even on a Monday morning when we go to school, walking down the alleyway, which is obviously a day or two after a weekend event, there's still litter that is clearly from the stadium. It's things like tickets, you know, you can't deny that. You know, you could argue about a can or a broken bottle, but yeah. So that's one thing. In terms of noise and music, the noisiest events that are on, as far as we're concerned, is when the 2020 cricket matches are on, because they play loud music until the match finishes, which is normally, it's an evening thing. So it's normally till quite late, even 10ish, like 10:30, I don't know exactly. But the music carries, it's very loud. And yes, this is going to be the same, if not till later. So that's not great. I don't think we can compare a rugby match, even a noisy, full-packed, exciting Rhinos match on a Friday night. It's 2 hours of crowd noise and excitement, but as soon as it finishes, it's quiet, and the crowd disperses quickly and quietly. I guess being in the turnways, because we have permits, the traffic doesn't seem too bad to here right now, but I know that it is bad further away, the parking and the traffic as well, which I'll get onto in a bit. So that's a 2 hour rugby match, which is noisy and exciting, but then it's done with straight away. That's very different from a sort of 5-6 hours of action, in actual boxing or wrestling action on the pitch, of, as has been alluded to, crowd noise and commentators and music and all the rest of it. So kind of, yeah, I don't think that's going to be great for residents, that's for sure. I don't know. I mean, Sue, you mentioned, and it's absolutely right, that we need to talk about facts. I don't know the demographics of boxing match crowds, but I do know that rugby match crowds are families with children, grandparents and kids. It is a family-friendly event. I don't know about boxing matches. Kind of informal chats with people I know that have been to boxing matches would say that it's not quite the same. But obviously, I don't know if they have facts, if they've researched on the demographics of who would be coming to their events, and whether they would appreciate 10, 15, 20,000 people just pitching out, many of them having been drinking for many hours, all of a sudden onto the streets of Headingley, where there's already a lot of bars, a lot of students out on a Friday night. It's quite a lot of extra people to suddenly appear on the streets, and there's an awful lot of extra Uber cars and other taxis to kind of take people away. Doesn't sound great for the sort of wider Headingley streets either. And in terms of cars and traffic, before we lived here, we lived near the bottom end of Cardigan Road, and I would say then that was when the traffic was worse for us, when matches were on. If we timed it wrong, either trying to leave our house or come back home, it was just a nightmare. You'd just be stuck on Cardigan Road for 20 minutes, half an hour, because of all the traffic trying to leave at once. So just there would be more of that, really. But that's all I wish to say. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for anyone of the objectors at this point from my two colleagues? That's fine. As I said, I did have some, but they've been sort of answered as the objectors have moved on. So thank you everyone for that. Can we go back to the applicant, please, if you wish to use your extra 5 minutes to respond to the objections raised, please.
Thank you. Yes, what I'd like to do is just run through some of the comments that have been raised, and just to focus on key facts. I feel it's a great shame that Councillor Illingworth mentioned that residents had given up in contacting the stadium. I feel that's a little bit unfair and also subjective. I also feel that there's been quite some conversation surrounding lighting, and the Elida Gibbs car park was mentioned. And again, just to point out, there is no lighting on that facility. It is not lit, so that is not a car park where lights will be left on. Floodlights have been mentioned. It could well be that for a boxing event that we don't even use the floodlights. If we do use the floodlights, they will be turned off at 11 p.m. I think it's important to note regarding we've mentioned quite a few cars that are going to be parked and ill-parked. Rugby matches, we actually cone streets surrounding the area. There's a coning plan that has actually been agreed with Highways. It's been agreed with West Yorkshire Police. And that will come into force and be agreed as part of our transport policy. We will also look at concepts such as park and ride, taking people away from the immediate area to places like Hyde Park, where they can then, or the train station, where they would then pick up public transport for their homeward journeys. We also note that quite a few residents have mentioned the parking in streets where we have permits. So that, the permits within the turnways, there's also permits within some of the other areas within Headingley. So again, this will be all part of our transport and travel policy. One of the biggest things we will be focusing on is moving groups of people out of the area via coaches and taking them to onward public transport facilities. However, should the event finish at 11, and there will be time for people to catch a train from Headingley into the city centre. And again, we will be liaising with transport authorities to provide additional stock because the current stock is not sufficient. I think it's also important to note that this is not a live music event. This is a boxing event where we will reuse recorded music, and that recorded music will be, we will use our existing PA system for that recorded music. And as everyone knows, our system has limits of the noise that can actually come from those speakers. And as agreed, the mitigation measures will continue to be applied throughout that PA system. I think I'd like to refer again just to the key facts that I've previously mentioned, but this application is to host 2 events up to 25,000 spectators. I know that one of the residents, I think it might have been Richard Parr, mentioned about the fact that, there's only 68 events one particular year. And I think it's really, really important that we could be hosting rugby and cricket matches, every day of the year. So we'd like to have sporting events here 365 days a year. And, that is something that we'll be focusing on over the coming years. But those figures, when I refer to the 68 events within 2018, that includes all events. That's not just rugby matches. That's every single cricket event. That's every single rugby event. And I think we should as well focus on the fact that I know Councillor Unworth mentioned that people had given up, but I think it's a really important fact that we have no outstanding complaints registered with the Environmental Health Service, and there's not been any on record since 2018. And that includes noise, that includes litter, that is the whole range of services from environmental health. We feel that this application really does support the stadium, Leeds Rhinos as a whole, and Leeds Rhinos Foundation. And we really do feel that it is good for the city and not just only for LCF&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Before we go into adjournment, just to discuss in private session, are there any questions for either Sue or objectors outstanding from either of my two colleagues?
Just one brief question, Chair, if I can.
Yeah, of course.
Yes, it was mentioned just then that there's a coning plan in terms of the parking. How far does that go out, and to what extent does this just lead to traffic displacement?
The coning plan currently for rugby matches is quite vast, so it actually takes us down St Anne's Drive. It's within the Stanmores, which Councillor Illingworth referred to. It goes into the Broomfields, Cardigan Road. However, for this particular event, should this licence be granted, we'd be working very closely with Highways and West Yorkshire Police to determine maybe a different coning plan. Maybe that should be extended further. However, we do have issues with the ward councillors in Headingley and in Kirkstall because the Kirkstall councillors obviously feel that the more coning that we actually have in this particular area, it pushes the problem further away. But as mentioned, we will look and definitely have part of our transport policy will be a park and ride facility. So we would like to move away from car travel anyway, and really encourage anybody who would be coming to this event to use public transport or to use our park and ride scheme, which we will heavily weight within pricing.
Thank you. Neil, is that all right? Any follow-up? Abigail, any questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I do have a question for Sue. I'm looking at the frequency of applications or the time in between them, because obviously we were sat around this table again in September last year, and then we're now here again, obviously for a completely different kind of application. At what point did you know you were going to make an application for wrestling?
So we started this application way back in May 2020. We were looking to look at all diverse opportunities that the stadium could develop. So we started that application at that time. We also, the application that you referred to, Councillor, was a variation, and that variation hearing should have been held in March 2020. So the boxing licence actually came after the variation application. However, due to COVID restrictions, the entertainment licensing, I think the hearing was due to take place on something like the 20th of March. I'm sure Matthew might be able to assist on this, but I think it was to take place on the 17th of March, 20th of March, and entertainment licensing actually cancelled that meeting the night before it was due to be held, and it was postponed and then rescheduled to the date where we met and that hearing took place. I think it was the 21st of September from memory. So yes, the variation came before the boxing licence, but due to COVID, one actually superseded the other. With regard to, sorry. with regards to the volume of applications made, the reason that there's been so many different premises licence applications made is that I'm sure you all know that our south stand and our north stand were completely demolished with effect from 2017 throughout to 2020 and rebuilt. And as a result of that, our premises licence became void. So at the time, as we opened and developed the stadium, we then reapplied, and that was one of my projects to actually apply for all the different premises licenses. In hindsight, it would have been a good idea to actually apply for all different regulated activities at the same time. But what we decided to do was to actually apply individually, stand by stand, and separate some of the regulated activities.
Okay, thank you. Because I'm really just concerned about the number of events, because we obviously granted 4, looking at 4 and trying to spread that through the year in consideration as well of residents. And then we now have another additional 2, so that makes it 6. So these are all part of my concern, but thank you very much. I have received the answers that I was looking for. Thanks.
Thank you. Just one from me, Sue, in relation to the park and ride consideration. Are you in? Is that quite a formed plan? Have you discussed with any transport operators about that, or is that just something you're in the initial stages of? How far along is that?
Our current event plan, which is travel and transport, already includes park and ride facilities and operates schemes that we performed previously at previous World Cups. We are in discussions with Arriva, First Bus regarding park and ride schemes for the World Cup, which will be taking place at Ellen Road and Headingley later this year in October, November. So we already have plans in place to work with First Bus. And the way that we look at that is that those park and ride facilities will be heavily subsidised. We may even look to fund those or add this facility to the ticket price so that it's a bundle, so people will actually use the park and ride facilities as well as attend the event. So it's not a new thing, to answer the question. We've undertaken these kinds of schemes before. Ideally, we'd like to run these at all rugby events. Something that I discussed with Councillor Werner, Councillor Lucinda, sorry, I forget her surname, Yeadon, some time ago. And we'd like to incorporate again, into the price that if you actually buy a ticket to come to a rugby game, then you can actually travel free on any public transport on the day of that game.
Okay, thank you. And forgive my ignorance, as not a cricket or rugby fan or anyone who's attended much at Headingley. Is for your events and for, if you were to be granted a licence in boxing events and for general matches, is car parking extra to the ticket price, or is that subsidised or included in the ticket price?
We've actually got 450 car parking spaces on site. And as Councillor Illingworth has mentioned, we also use a site known as Elida Gibbs, which is just near the Stanmore Terrace. We tend to use that for staff, or we use it as an overflow facility. But like most matches, people buy a corporate package. So part of that corporate package would be to watch any kind of regulated entertainment, to have a meal, a drink, and we find that those people don't tend to drive.
And just to answer the question, for any car parking for people attending even a sporting or extra events, is that included in ticket price or charged extra?
That's right, yeah, it's part of the corporate package.
Okay, thank you. That's it from questions for me. Any movers from Neil or Abigail? That's Fine, thank you, everyone. We'll now move into private session to deliberate on the application. Could I ask that everyone remain available should we have any additional questions, and that could be for the applicant or objectors. And if there are any additional questions, you'll be invited back into the meeting by the clerk. At the moment, you'll be put back into the waiting room, and we'll go into a private breakout room. I will point out, we're looking at the time, let's have a 5 to 10 minute break anyway, as well as the adjournment. So for 5 or 10 minutes, you won't be expected to be asked any questions or anything like that. And it gives people a chance to have a break. And that goes for everyone and us as well. But especially for the objectors and applicant, at least you can do what you need to do for 10 minutes or so. Could I ask Debbie just to sort out the breakout rooms and waiting rooms and things, please?
Tasha's on with that, thank you.
I'll just wait for everyone else to get back into the main meeting. So please bear with us. Can I just pull around mute and everyone expecting us back in the room?
It's like it's a foregone conclusion.
Yes, I think we are all back.
You feel when something's wrong, don't
I want it's yes, I think everybody's back in. Yes, that's right.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Well, thank you everyone for your patience there. We don't have any further questions or comments as a subcommittee from members. So that brings an end to proceedings today. So thank you everyone for your attendance and your patience in waiting there. Sometimes there are things to pick at. It does conclude the business for today, and you will all be informed of the decision within 5 working days. And thank you very much and have a good